Alrighty, time to build my beginner's bag. Let's see what we got. Emperor, okay, I'd like to own the fairways with some big distance. You know what, let's just see best discs for a beginner. Huh, that one seems like a good video. Let's check it out. Hold up, I recommended an eagle to beginners. This is not gonna work. We're definitely gonna have to redo this video. What is up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here. Recently, I had the chance to go back and watch a video that I put out close to 2 years ago, and let me tell you, it was pretty rough. I'm grateful for all of you pushing through the really bad quality and embracing the content anyways. The video I'm talking about was building a beginner's bag, where I go through all of the discs that are available and try to recommend some that I believe beginners should throw. Just like I'm trying to help each of you improve your game, I'm trying to step up the quality as well as the quality of advice that we're passing along here on the Robbie C channel.
So then, Mr. YouTube man, what's today's video all about?
Excellent question, random bystander slash possible hater. I spent the last 2 years helping beginners find discs that work for them, and my list of suggestions has changed a little bit, although I still stand behind most of the suggestions that I put in this video right here. You should definitely go check out once this video is over. Except for the eagle. Like, what was I thinking? Let's dive into a couple terms and ideas that are going to be really important in helping us find those perfect beginner discs. Believe it or not, discs are actually designed to fly differently even when they're thrown the same way. There are tons of intricacies to this, but the most basic way I can explain it is that when a right-handed player throws an understable disc on a backhand, it naturally wants to go to the right. And when a right-handed player throws an overstable disc on a backhand flat, it naturally wants to go to the left. So even though both of these frisbees are drivers, they're designed to fly entirely different, which is why we need to figure out which discs are meant to fly well for beginners. So as a beginner, you may be saying,
Well, Robbie, how am I supposed to pick it up and know whether it's understable or overstable?
and the best answer we have for this is checking the flight numbers. Flight numbers are the 4 numbers printed on the front of a disc which denote speed, glide, turn, and fade. Now you could do a whole video on flight numbers, and one day soon we're going to dive into flight numbers, but that one's coming in the future. The trouble is, sometimes companies don't put flight numbers on their discs. Thanks, Prodigy. You guys are really helpful when it comes to that. Sometimes there's a 5th number and we're trying to figure out what's going on with that. Thanks a lot, Discraft. And then sometimes for most companies in disc golf, the numbers don't matter because the disc flies differently anyway, especially run to run within the game. We go over all of that to say that while flight numbers can give us a good gauge on where to start when it comes to looking at discs, it shouldn't be the end-all be-all on whether or not a disc is perfect for us. And that's because overall there is no governing body that determines what a 9-speed is versus an 8-speed, but there are 2 quick rules that we want to use when it comes to trying to trust flight numbers and selecting discs that are best for a beginner's bag. The first is speed. We want to make sure that when we're selecting discs, we don't select any discs that are faster than a 9-speed. Lots of people can make the mistake of thinking a faster disc goes farther, and while that technically can be true, speed is a threshold that must be met by throwing the disc correctly in order for the disc to fly that distance anyways. When we don't meet that threshold, the disc does not fly properly, and in fact usually gets less distance than if we just throw something slower that we can actually reach that speed. The other rule is that we want 0 or lower. What do I mean by this? When we take the turn and fade and add them together, we want the result to be 0 or in the negatives. There are special cases where we can step up to the total being 1, but a safe bet is for us to say it's 0 or in the negatives. This translates to the disc being understable, and understable discs are traditionally easier for us to throw as beginners. So we're a few minutes into this video and you're probably telling yourself,
YouTube man, you gonna actually recommend any discs? That's what I came here for. I want my shopping list.
and I hear that. So let's go through some of these manufacturers and talk about discs that I would recommend to a beginner if they walked into this shop right here. The first disc, and I'm actually shooketh that I didn't recommend it in the last video, is a Mako 3. This is a bread and butter of Innova mid-ranges and an incredibly neutral disc that for beginners is going to fly maybe a little bit more on the overstable side, but is a fantastic disc for you to kind of grow and learn into as it becomes a straight flyer for you, and eventually it's going to start being an understable option for you as well. The second option that we're looking looking at is a newer disc within the Innova lineup, and that is the Invader. The Invader is a putter, and while some of you may think that putters aren't great discs because they're just meant to be thrown into the basket, learning how to throw a putter is one of my favorite things to teach beginners, because if you can throw putters well, you would be amazed at how well you can start throwing other discs. A lot of people think that the Invader is going to be overstable when they first get a hold of it, but they come to find out this can be a sort of point and shoot disc that goes exactly where you want it to go. Now, the third option I'm recommending from Innova is a new disc to me, but one that I've heard a lot of people really enjoy, and it's a Pig. You should definitely check out a Pig. They're an incredible disc, and I know they break the rules of what I said when it came to flight numbers, but it's my video, and Pig is love, Pig is life. Next up, we're gonna head over to the world of gyro. And what do we mean by gyro? Gyro is this little extra band that's on the outside of the disc, and although it can feel different to some people, once you get a hold of a gyro disc, you start to realize it just goes farther. That's what it be. The first disc I'm recommending from gyro is the Signal. The Signal is an understable fairway driver and has some incredible distance potential. While being on that understable side, it means that at first, because it's a driver, it's going to want to go to the left. Eventually, you're starting to be able to throw this really straight and really far pretty fast. The second option is a newer one within the MVP lineup, and that is the Paradox. Paradox is an incredible mid-range, and I recommend this probably more than any other mid-range when it comes to beginners right now. This disc isn't just understable, it is super understable, which means that when I put it in a beginner's hands, they're actually going to be able to get some pretty phenomenal distance out of it right away. The hard part is when we start relying on discs that are super understable, it means that we can quickly grow out of them from a beginner phase, and that's okay. Some of the discs we're recommending here are designed to help you become a better player today, and some of them are going to require you to grow into them. It's really about testing that longevity. The third gyro disc I'm going to recommend is the Proxy. This is an incredible throwing putter that can go pretty far and pretty straight pretty fast. Learning to throw a disc straight is one of the hardest things to achieve in the game of disc golf, and one of the best ways we do this is by taking an understable disc and throwing it on hyzer. Remember, as a right-handed player, an understable disc wants to go to the right, but when we throw it on a hyzer, which is that outside edge being down, it makes the disc want to go left. This internal fight causes the disc to go really straight, and the Proxy does a phenomenal job at this. This also gives us a quick chance to talk about plastic type. All three of these discs are Proxies, and yes, the colors look different, but the plastic type also changes. When you move towards more of a base plastic, this causes the discs to naturally be a little more understable, which means that if you really like a disc, but you find that it's hooking up or going left too much for you, once again for you right-handed players, it might be worth moving towards more of a base plastic. These are traditionally cheaper, but they don't last as long as some of the premium plastics. Premium plastics are traditionally a little more overstable when it comes to what the disc is supposed to be doing. All that to say that if you find a disc that you really like, maybe try messing around with it in a bunch of different plastic types and see which one works best for you. And there's even a world where it's okay to have 3 of the same disc in 3 different plastics. Tons of players do this, including the pros. But let's talk about the real question. Have you tried a pick? Discraft has some of the best players in the game on their team right now, and if you're watching this in 2022, lots of people that you're going to meet are throwing a lot of Discraft. And that's fantastic because they have some really great discs. For the distance driver, we have the Heat. This is a fantastic disc that goes for about a mile. Maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but the Heat is a great distance driver, especially if you feel like you have to have a driver in your bag. As a beginner, I wouldn't look much farther than the Heat. Next up for a mid-range, and arguably the most popular mid-range of all time, we have the Buzz. The Mako 3 is a fantastic workhorse within the Innova lineup, and the Buzz is a great complement. Now with a -1 turn and a 1 fade, the result comes out to 0, which is the exact same as the Mako 3, but you'll find that the Buzz flies a little more overstable than a traditional Mako 3. The Buzz has gained its popularity for a reason. It's a phenomenal disc that does so much while you're out there on the course, and it's a pretty easy way to get distance. Before you solidify your bag, I definitely recommend testing out a Buzz to see if it's worth the hype to you or not. Our last option is the putter option for Discraft, and for that one, I'm actually going with the Fierce. The Fierce is a putter that Discraft designed for one of their top pros, Paige Pierce. This, like the Proxy, is an understable putter that just seems to go go wherever you want it to go. Tons of people putt with this, and in a premium plastic, it actually makes for an amazing throwing putter. Although if you can get your hands on some base plastic ones, I know plenty of beginners who love throwing their Fierce just as well. You're gonna have to be Fierce to find these, but once you do, it's totally worth it. But I will say, if you like the Fierce and you don't want to spend the $30 to $40 that you need to buy one of these, we can head over to the $10 version of the Fierce, and that is the Deputy. The Deputy is a phenomenal putter made by Dynamic Discs, and it brings up an interesting point that exists within the disc golf world. There are hundreds of different discs available out there, and often they can end up looking pretty similar. So if you really like a disc but you can't seem to find it, be sure to do a little digging and a little research, and you might be able to find an alternative to it that is either cheaper or more readily available. Now, a disc that I love recommending to beginners and probably has become one of my favorite mid-ranges of all time is the Dynamic Disc Bounty. This is an understable mid-range that, although it has a little bit of a funky rim to it, can be a fantastic flyer that is not only understable but actually has a little bit of sort of overstability to it as well, so that you don't have to worry about it just going all the way to the right forever and ever and ever. There are a few people that I recommend the Bounty to who don't instantly fall in love with it as well, and you should definitely check it out if you're looking for a phenomenal mid-range that goes so far. The fairway driver I'm going to recommend here from the Trilogy lineup is the Underworld. The Underworld is an incredible disc that I know I leaned on heavily when I was really getting into the game. It's incredibly understable but has a ton of glide, and you really feel it when you throw this disc. It's like the air gets up underneath it and just says, "Carry me home, my wayward son, off into the distant future." If you're looking for a driver that feels great in your hand and you want to go really far without feeling like you have to try too hard, I would definitely recommend checking out the Underworld. You want to talk about plastic that feels good in the hand? How about the thumb trek on a pick? Feels great. Now for our last stop, we had to consider the Discmaniacs of the world, and we have some great options here that we can't overlook. The first is one of my favorite throwing putters, and that is the Sensei. This thing has a decent amount of dome to it, so it can feel a little deep while you hold it if you don't have some larger hands, but this disc says it only has 3 glide, and I think the proper answer is more like 97. Every time that I've thrown a Sensei, it amazes me just how far this thing goes, especially for being a putter. And I have to give a shout out to Nate Perkins for hooking me up with my first ever Sensei, because it was a game changer for me. Next up is a great mid-range that can often get overlooked among all the other options that are out there, and that is the Origin. The Origin is a fantastic flyer that, very similar to the Buzz, really just wants to do everything. It can be understable when you want it to, it can be overstable when you want it to, and when you just need it to go really straight, guess what? It does that too. I honestly love how this plastic feels in the hand, and if you're gonna check out the Buzz, why not check out the Origin as well? Both great discs. Last but not least, and probably the hardest disc to throw that I've recommended throughout the entire video, is the Essence. I was not a believer in the Essence until I threw one, and when I threw one, I was like, wow, this isn't just a great disc for beginners, but honestly, everyone out there in the world. It's super solid. The Essence has a bit of a cult following, and as you can see on this empty rack, well, all except for this one that we might be taking. Don't tell my wife we bought another disc. Thanks, comments. Helping me out. Although I do think this has a place in a beginner's bag as being a somewhat overstable option for you, I think you can definitely get an Essence and sort of view it as your grow into disc to see when you can really start ripping it in the future. Speaking of underrated options, a disc I don't talk about very often is the Pick. Have you heard of it? Thought about trying it out? Overall, there are so many options that we could recommend for beginners, and I know that I am a failure and I left some out. So go ahead, roast me in the comments, but let me know your favorites so that the comments can become a resource for people to come and check for other discs to check out in the future. I hope these discs make your bag, and I hope that you get all the birdies and dreams you could wish to achieve. I want to say thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have an incredible rest of the week. But for now, I'm going to leave you with the birdie.